One night meant to protect women became the night a millionaire whipped his pregnant wife. The gala was in full bloom, music rising, cameras flashing, when Jordan Kane's rage exploded. He grabbed Amara Lawson by the wrist, hard enough to make her gasp. "You embarrassed me," he hissed. Before anyone could react, he tore a leather whip from the charity display and struck. The first crack silenced the orchestra. The second made the crowd step back. The third drew blood through her pale blue dress. Amara fell to her knees, one hand over her belly, as she went whispering to the baby she was trying to save. "Please, hold on." No one moved. No one dared. Power kept them frozen. Then, through the echo of her sobs, the ballroom doors burst open. A tall man entered, gray-haired, unshaken, eyes like cold steel. Malcolm Lawson stopped beside her and looked straight at Jordan. His voice cut the air in half. "You just beat my daughter." That moment ended the party and began the reckoning. If you believe no woman should ever stand alone, subscribe and stay. Her fight for justice is only beginning. No one breathed. The music had died. The only sound left was the shallow gasp coming from Amara. She lay on the marble floor, her hands clutching her belly. A dark red stain spread across her pale blue dress, blooming wider with every heartbeat. Jordan Kane stood frozen, the whip still dangling from his hand. The confidence that once filled his eyes had vanished. Around him, guests stared but did not move. Wealth had turned them into statues. Malcolm Lawson stepped forward through the silence. His shoes echoed on marble, measured, deliberate. He looked down at his daughter, then up at the man who had hurt her. His voice was low, heavy with control. "Call an ambulance, now." Jordan didn't answer. One of the guests fumbled for a phone, hands shaking. The moment stretched like glass about to shatter. Malcolm knelt beside Amara. Her eyes fluttered, barely open. "Dad," she whispered. "The baby." He pressed her hand. "Don't speak, sweetheart. I'm here." The sirens began to rise outside, a faint wail growing louder. As paramedics rushed in, Malcolm held her close, refusing to let her slip away. For the first time, the powerful man looked terrified, not of loss, but of himself. As the sirens wailed closer, Malcolm followed the stretcher into the night, toward a fight he didn't know he still had in him. The ambulance sped through the Atlanta night, sirens splitting the darkness. Inside, the flashing red lights washed over Malcolm's face. He sat beside the stretcher, gripping Amara's trembling hand. Her skin felt cold, too light in his palm. The paramedic called out vitals in clipped tones, but the words blurred in his mind. All he heard was the soft, uneven rhythm of her breathing. He looked at her and saw every moment he had missed. Birthdays, graduations, late-night calls unanswered because business had come first. He had built an empire out of numbers, but not enough time for his child. "Hold on," he whispered. "You hear me, Amara? Hold on." Her lips moved faintly, eyes still closed. "Baby." The paramedic leaned in. "She's stable for now. We're almost there." Malcolm turned to the window. The city lights streaked by like memories, bright but untouchable. He clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. The power he had worshipped all his life meant nothing here. In that small, shaking space, the billionaire felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear, not of losing control, but of losing love. Morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, cold and sterile. Machines beeped softly beside Amara's bed. Her eyelids fluttered open, heavy and slow. For a second, she didn't know where she was. The smell of antiseptic, the ache in her body, the faint pulse of pain along her spine, all reminders came rushing back. "Baby?" Her voice cracked like paper. A nurse leaned over, adjusting the monitor. "The heartbeat's weak, but still there. You're both fighters." Amara closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Relief burned like sunlight after a storm. She whispered, "Thank God." Across the room, Malcolm sat in silence, suit rumpled, eyes red. He hadn't slept. When she looked at him, his mask broke. He reached for her hand, pressing it gently. "You scared me," he said softly. "You always did. She smiled weakly. "You came." "Of course I did." For the first time in years, he didn't sound like a CEO. He sounded like a father. Outside, the world kept spinning, news cameras waiting, headlines brewing. But in that small room, nothing else mattered. 2 heartbeats. One faint, one strong. Both refusing to give up. The room had grown quiet again. Malcolm stood by the window, looking out at the skyline he once ruled. Towers of glass and steel reflected the sunrise, monuments to his ambition. Yet none of it could protect his daughter. "I built empires," he whispered, voice almost breaking, "but failed to protect my own." Amara was asleep, her hand still resting over her belly. He watched the slow rise and fall of her chest, the fragile proof that life had chosen to stay. In the reflection on the glass, he saw not a billionaire, but a father who had traded too much. Meetings, mergers, awards. Everyone had cost him a moment with her. He thought of the nights she'd called and he'd let it ring, the messages he never answered. The small girl who once ran to him for help now lay broken because he hadn't been there soon enough. His eyes closed. A single tear traced down the line of his jaw. For the first time, Malcolm Lawson prayed. Not for profit, not for power, but for another chance to do right by her. The monitors beeped steadily behind him, counting time he would never waste again. By morning, his private guilt had become the world's obsession. By dawn, Atlanta was on fire. Digitally. News tickers flashed the headline, "Millionaire beats pregnant wife at charity gala." The story spread faster than smoke. Every network ran it on loop. Every phone screen lit up with her name. Clips from the gala flooded social feeds, her scream, his whip, the silence that followed. Influencers dissected it. Commentators argued about power and control. Hashtags multiplied. Hashtag justice for Amara. Money is not power. Stand with her. Talk shows booked psychologists, lawyers, and moral experts. Everyone had an opinion. Few had empathy. Stock prices of Kane Technologies dropped within hours. Investors panicked. Jordan Kane's face became the symbol of everything wrong with privilege. Malcolm Lawson watched from his office window as reporters camped outside the hospital. Cameras pointed toward every ambulance that came and went. He turned away, heart heavy but mind sharpening. He had seen the world destroy reputations overnight, but this time it wasn't his. The story was no longer just gossip. It was war played out in headlines. Malcolm whispered to himself, "Let them talk. Let the truth echo louder." The city wanted a villain. Now they had one. The Lawson residence was quiet except for the buzz of incoming calls. Reporters, lawyers, and board members all wanted statements. Malcolm ignored them. In the study, David Lawson stood by the fireplace, pacing. "We can't just sit here," he said. "He nearly killed her." Malcolm didn't raise his voice. "We'll act, but not recklessly." Sarah Chen entered, composed as always, a folder in her hand. "The footage from the gala is solid. Multiple witnesses confirm what happened. But this isn't just about proving he hit her." David frowned. "Then what is it about?" Malcolm looked at them both. "This isn't about money. It's about truth." The room fell silent. Even Sarah stopped flipping pages. He continued, voice steady. "If we chase revenge, we become him. If we chase truth, we end him." David nodded slowly. "So, we go after the evidence, not the rage." Malcolm's gaze drifted toward the window. The city skyline gleamed under the morning sun, beautiful and cruel. "Gather everything," he said. "I want his empire dismantled one fact at a time." This wasn't anger anymore, it was justice in motion. Amara scrolled through her phone, the blue glow painting her bruised face. Every feed showed the same video, the whip, her scream, her father's words. The entire world had seen her pain. She muted the sound, but the images still spoke. People she'd never met called her brave. Others called her weak. The internet loved drama, not healing. Her fingers trembled as she read the comments. Then she set the phone aside. Silence filled the room. deep and heavy. She remembered her father's voice, calm but unshakable. "You just beat my daughter." The way the air had changed when he said it. For the first time, someone had spoken for her. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "I used to think silence kept me safe." The words lingered in the sterile air. They didn't sound like weakness anymore. They sounded like awakening. Outside her door, nurses whispered about reporters waiting in the lobby. Inside, Amara closed her eyes. The world saw her as broken. But beneath the bruises, something fierce had begun to rise. At the top floor of his penthouse, Jordan Kane stood surrounded by glass and silence. The television replayed his face over and over, labeled abuser, monster, millionaire with no mercy. He hurled a whiskey glass against the wall. "That old man can't touch me," he shouted. "I built this city on my name." His assistant flinched but didn't speak. Jordan paced the room, hair disheveled, tie hanging loose. "It's a smear campaign," he muttered. "They think they can ruin me? I'll bury them in lawsuits." He slammed his hand against the desk. "Call the PR team. I want statements, interviews, anything. We spin this before it's too late." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, the investors are pulling out. Stocks are down 30%. Jordan's eyes burned. "Then find someone who still believes in me." When the assistant left, silence returned. The city lights blinked outside his window, indifferent. Jordan stared at his reflection, his perfect world cracking behind him. For the first time, he saw not power, but fear. He poured another drink, hands trembling. "No one destroys Jordan Kane," he whispered, but his voice no longer sounded certain. Back at Lawson Holdings, the conference room was quiet except for the rustle of papers. Sarah Chen stood at the head of the table, calm and precise. "We'll crush him with facts, not fury," she said. "We start with verified footage, witness statements, and financial records. We don't just prove violence, we prove corruption." Malcolm nodded. "He's used power to silence her for too long. Let's make that power his downfall." David leaned forward. "What about the board? They'll resist exposure." Sarah adjusted her glasses. "Then we remind them that loyalty to a criminal is complicity." Malcolm's eyes were sharp. "Every shell company, every bribe, we trace it. No leaks, no emotion. Quiet precision." David exhaled. "We're going to war, aren't we?" Malcolm shook his head slowly. "Not war. Justice. War destroys everything. Justice rebuilds." Sarah gathered the folders and closed her laptop. "Then we begin today." Malcolm looked at his daughter's picture on his phone, a younger Amara smiling in sunlight. "For her," he whispered. Outside, the storm clouds rolled over the skyline. Inside, the Lawsons had chosen their battlefield. Just as exhaustion began to sink in, the last person anyone expected walked through the door. The meeting had stretched past midnight. Files covered the Lawson boardroom table, but one piece was still missing. Proof. Then the doors opened quietly. Linda Parker stepped inside, clutching her purse. Her uniform was plain, her eyes tired. "Mr. Lawson," she said softly. "I used to work for them." Malcolm turned. "For the Kanes?" She nodded. Her voice trembled. "Yes, sir. I was their housekeeper for 3 years." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small silver USB drive. "I recorded everything." David frowned. "Everything?" Linda's hands shook. The nights he hit her. The screams no one heard. The gala, too. "I didn't mean to spy, but I couldn't stay silent anymore." Malcolm's eyes softened. "You risked everything bringing this here." Linda looked down. She didn't deserve what he did. No woman does. Sarah took the USB gently, her expression sharp with purpose. "We'll make sure it's used the right way." As Linda left, Malcolm stared at the drive gleaming under the light. For the first time, truth had a form he could hold. He whispered to Sarah, This changes everything." The conference room lights dimmed as Sarah inserted the USB. The screen flickered, then came alive. There was no music, no edits, just the cold, raw sound of the gala. Laughter faded into chaos. The whip cracked through the air. Amara's scream filled the room. Everyone froze. Even David, who had seen countless brutal cases, looked away. The footage showed the full truth: Jordan's fury, the silent crowd, the blood, the humiliation. Amara's voice, broken but clear, whispered through the speakers, "Please, stop." When the clip ended, no one spoke. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He reached across the table and gripped Sarah's hand. "We end this now." Sarah nodded, her voice steady. "We'll verify it. Once it's authenticated, he's finished." David exhaled shakily. "The world thought they saw everything that night. They didn't see this." Malcolm turned toward the window, the city lights glowing in reflection. "Then we'll show them." The room filled with silence again, but it wasn't shock anymore. It was resolve. The truth had found its weapon. And the next morning, Jordan Kane faced a wall of cameras. His tie was perfect, his smile rehearsed. "Good morning," he began smoothly. "I'm here to address the lies spread about me." Flashes erupted. "Mr. Kane, what about the video?" one reporter shouted. Jordan lifted his hand, calm and confident. "That video was edited, manipulated. It's a smear campaign led by the Lawson family. I'm the real victim here." Gasps rippled through the crowd. He continued, "Amara's father wants to destroy my company. He's twisting a misunderstanding into a crime." Behind the microphones, his lawyer nodded along. One reporter pressed harder. "Are you saying the footage is fake?" "Yes," Jordan said sharply. "Fabricated. Anyone can make a villain out of a man with money." The conference ended with noise and flashing lights. Back in his office, Jordan dropped the polished smile. He poured another drink, hand trembling. The world might doubt him for now, but he told himself lies enough to believe one more day. Outside, protesters began to gather, holding signs with her name. Justice for Amara. The tide was turning, and he could feel it pulling him under. The clip of Jordan's press conference played on the screen in Malcolm's office. His family and Sarah stood around him, silent. When Jordan's voice declared, "The video was fake," Malcolm's hand clenched. Sarah muted the sound. "He's trying to rewrite the story before we can finish it?" David scoffed. "He's digging his own grave on live television." Malcolm's eyes never left the screen. "The louder he lies, the deeper he digs his grave." Sarah looked at him, a hint of a smile breaking through her focus. "Then let him talk. We'll speak once, and with proof." David leaned forward. "How long until the forensic team verifies the footage?" "An hour," Sarah replied. "Once it's confirmed, we release it. No edits, no commentary." Malcolm nodded. "Good. Let the truth speak for itself." Outside, thunder rolled through the Atlanta sky. Inside, the tension grew heavy but steady. Sarah closed her laptop. "When it goes out, the world will finally see who he really is." Malcolm looked at his daughter's picture again. "No more silence," he said. "We finish this tonight." Night fell. Rain streaked the glass walls of Lawson Holdings. Sarah sat at her desk, finalizing the upload. David hovered beside her, watching the progress bar inch forward. The video was untouched. No narration, no edits. Only reality. The moment it went live, notifications exploded. Networks picked it up instantly. The screen filled with the truth. Jordan raising the whip, Amara collapsing. The crowd frozen in fear, and Malcolm's entrance, his voice clear as thunder. "You just beat my daughter." The world stopped scrolling. Comments flooded in. Viewers cried, cursed, shared, and raged. Hashtags returned stronger than before. #justice. For Amara, #stand tall. In the office, Malcolm watched silently. His reflection merged with the city lights. "It's done," he said quietly. Sarah nodded. "Now we wait." But no one really waited. Within minutes, every major network replayed the footage. Jordan's denials collapsed under the weight of his own cruelty. Across the city, screens glowed blue with the truth, the same color as the dress Amara had worn that night. Justice had spoken, and its voice was unmistakable. By morning, the internet had transformed into a storm of solidarity. The hashtag Stand Tall, covered every platform. Women across America reposted Amara's story with their own words of pain and courage. "She spoke for all of us," one comment read. Another said, "That scream, it was every woman's silence breaking." News anchors called it the reckoning of privilege. Influencers, activists, even celebrities joined in. The same crowd that once whispered now shouted for justice. In the hospital, Amara's nurse showed her the trending page. "You've started something," she said softly. Amara scrolled through the messages, tears blurring the screen. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. She saw thousands standing with her, mothers, daughters, strangers who understood the fear she had lived in. Somewhere in that flood of voices, hope returned. The pain was still there, but it had purpose. Across the city, in boardrooms and coffee shops, people stopped pretending not to see. Justice was no longer a headline. It was a movement. That evening, Amara sat by the hospital window, watching the sky fade into gold. Her father stood nearby, phone pressed to his ear, giving orders in his calm, commanding voice. The world was moving fast, but she felt strangely still. Every headline carried her name. Every broadcast replayed her suffering. For days, she'd been the face of pain, but not of strength. She looked at her reflection in the glass, tired eyes, bandaged skin, but something burning behind them. When Malcolm ended the call, she spoke quietly. "If he erased me in public, I'll reclaim myself the same way." Malcolm turned, surprised. "You want to speak out?" She nodded. "Not as his victim, as myself." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "That's my daughter." Amara took a deep breath. "I want people to see what silence costs, and what it can't take away." Malcolm placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll make sure your voice is heard, loud and clear." Outside, thunder rolled through the distance. Inside, her resolve solidified. Fear had taken everything from her once. It would not take her again. The hospital's small media room was silent except for the red recording light. Amara sat straight, dressed simply in pale blue. No makeup, no disguise, just truth. She looked into the lens, her voice calm but steady. "My name is Amara Lawson. You've seen what happened to me. You've heard what he said. I'm not here for pity. I'm here for every woman told to stay quiet." Her words came slow, deliberate. "I believed silence would protect me. It didn't. Speaking out is the only thing that does." She paused, eyes glistening. "No one deserves to live in fear. No one deserves to be hurt and told to hide it. I survived, but many don't. So, I'll fight. Not just for me, for all of us." Her breath trembled, but her tone did not. "To my father, thank you. You gave me back my voice." When the camera turned off, the room stayed quiet. Sarah Chen nodded once, moved beyond words. An hour later, the video went live. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Amara had spoken, and the world listened. The next day, every major outlet carried two headlines: "Amara Lawson speaks out," and "Kane Group stocks plunge 40%. Jordan Kane sat in his office, eyes red, tie undone. The television behind him replayed her statement over and over. Her calm voice cut deeper than any accusation. He slammed his fist against the table. "She's ruining me." His lawyer shifted nervously. "Sir, the SEC has opened an inquiry. Investors are panicking. The board wants answers." Jordan glared at him. "They want blood. They want mine." The lawyer didn't reply. Jordan looked out the window. The skyline that once defined his empire now seemed distant, untouchable. Phones rang unanswered. Contracts were pulled. His empire was rotting from the inside. He poured another drink, but his hand shook too much to lift it. On every screen across the city, the image of Amara's face replaced his own. The man who thought he owned power was now owned by shame. At Lawson Holdings, the lights burned late. Stacks of documents covered the table. Sarah Chen stood at the center, her tone precise and calm. "We have him on fraud and assault," she said. "The financial trail is solid. Forged signatures, offshore accounts, false property transfers. Combined with the footage, it's airtight." David leaned forward. "So, what's next?" Sarah closed the file. "We take it to court. Every count. Every proof." Malcolm nodded slowly. "Then we go to war. The lawful way." No one spoke after that. The weight of what lay ahead filled the room. Amara entered quietly, still fragile but standing tall. "Whatever happens," she said, "we finish this with dignity, not revenge." Malcolm met her gaze. "Justice, not vengeance. That's the difference between us and him." Sarah smiled faintly. "Then let's make history." As the team dispersed, Malcolm lingered by the window. The city lights flickered like silent witnesses. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, truth walks into court." Outside, the storm had cleared. Inside, the Lawsons were ready. The battle was no longer about pain, it was about reclaiming power. The courthouse steps overflowed with reporters. Cameras flashed as Amara Lawson arrived, her father at her side. The crowd parted when they saw her. Small, steady, visibly pregnant. The whisper of microphones followed her every step. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Lawyers shuffled papers, journalists scribbled notes. Jordan Kane sat at the defense table, eyes forward but face pale. When Amara took the witness stand, silence swept through the room. She placed one hand over her belly as if steadying herself. The judge nodded gently. "Mrs. Lawson, are you ready?" "Yes," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Every word felt like it belonged to every woman watching. Outside, television screens replayed her entrance. The image of a pregnant black woman standing to face her abuser became a symbol, grace in defiance. Malcolm sat behind her, unmoving but proud. As the first witness was called, Amara exhaled slowly. The air in the room shifted. The trial had begun. For the first time, justice had a face, and it was hers. Linda Parker sat at the stand, hands clasped tight. Her uniform was simple, but her presence filled the room. "Ms. Parker," the prosecutor began, "you worked for Mr. and Mrs. Kane?" "Yes," she said softly, "for 3 years." "And during that time did you witness acts of violence?" Linda swallowed hard. "Yes, he hit her before. Many times." She paused, eyes glistening. "I hid cameras to prove it. I couldn't watch anymore." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Jordan's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Linda continued, voice steady now. "I saw her hide bruises under long sleeves. I saw her smile for guests while crying in silence. That night at the gala, I knew it would happen again, so I recorded it." The prosecutor lifted the printed frame from the footage. "Is this your recording?" "It is," Linda said, tears finally falling. She never screamed for help, but her eyes did. Malcolm closed his eyes behind the bench, his jaw tight. The courtroom wasn't just hearing testimony, they were witnessing truth unmasked. Dr. Patel, the attending physician, took the stand next. Her posture was calm, her tone clinical yet compassionate. "Doctor," the prosecutor asked, "you examined Mrs. Lawson after the incident. What did you observe?" Dr. Patel opened her folder. Bruising across the back and abdomen. Significant trauma consistent with repeated strikes. Approximately 300. The courtroom murmured. The judge raised a hand for silence. "Doctor," the prosecutor pressed, "could these injuries be the result of uncontrolled anger?" Dr. Patel shook her head. "No. 300 lashes aren't anger, they're intention. Each strike took aim. Each one meant to hurt, not to frighten." She paused, voice softening. Her pregnancy survived by chance. Had she been hit one more time, we'd be discussing a funeral, not a trial. Malcolm's hand gripped his cane until his knuckles whitened. Amara's eyes filled but didn't break. Jordan shifted uneasily at the defense table, his mask of confidence cracking. Dr. Patel closed her folder. "This wasn't an accident," she said. "It was control." The room stayed silent long after she stepped down. The judge turned toward Amara. "Mrs. Lawson, you may address the defendant." She stood slowly, the courtroom holding its breath. Her eyes met Jordan's across the space between them. No fear, no hatred, just clarity. "You took everything," she said quietly, "but not my soul." Jordan blinked, speechless. Amara continued, her voice firm. "You tried to break me so I'd never speak, but I'm still here, and I'm speaking now." She looked at the jury. What he did wasn't about love, it was about power, and when power goes unchecked, it destroys everything human. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't look away. He thought silence was loyalty. "I thought it was safety. We were both wrong." Jordan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, whispering something in his ear, but Jordan didn't move. Amara finished softly, "I forgive him, not to free him, but to free myself." The judge nodded, visibly moved. When Amara sat down, the room stayed silent. No headline could capture what had just happened. It wasn't rage, it was release. Hours passed before the jury returned. The judge's gavel struck once. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman rose. "We have, Your Honor." The courtroom held its breath. "On all counts of aggravated assault, fraud, and falsification, guilty." Gasps erupted, followed by a silence so deep it echoed. Amara closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her face, not from pain, but from peace. Malcolm reached over and took her hand, his grip firm, proud. Jordan sat frozen, eyes empty. When the bailiff stepped forward with handcuffs, he didn't resist. His empire had fallen, not with explosions but with truth. As he was led away, Amara looked toward him one last time. "This is where it ends," she whispered. The judge's final words filled the room. "Justice is served." Outside, reporters shouted, cameras flashed, but Amara didn't stop for them. She walked out into the sunlight, her steps slow, steady, unbroken. The woman who had entered the courtroom as a victim left it as something else, proof that courage can be louder than cruelty. Hours after the verdict, the courthouse stood silent. Justice had been loud enough. The courthouse had emptied. Reporters lingered outside, their voices fading into the evening. Inside a quiet room, Malcolm Lawson stood by the window, watching the crowd disperse. David entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. "It's over," he said softly. "We won." Malcolm didn't turn right away. "No, son," he said, voice low. "We didn't win. We just stopped losing." He took the cup, still staring at the horizon. "We destroy his power, not his people. Let the law handle the rest." David nodded slowly. "You really forgive him?" Malcolm sighed. "Forgiveness isn't for him. It's for us." Across the room, Amara sat resting, hands over her stomach. The faint thump of the baby's heartbeat filled the monitor beside her. She looked peaceful for the first time in months. Malcolm turned to her, a small smile breaking through the exhaustion. "We did what we came for," he whispered. Outside, the courthouse lights dimmed. The war was over. What remained was healing. Weeks passed. The hospital room that once echoed with fear now carried the quiet rhythm of recovery. Amara lay back as the doctor adjusted the monitor. The soft heartbeat filled the room again. Steady, strong. She smiled, pressing her hand against her belly. "He can't touch us anymore," she whispered. The nurse smiled. "You're both doing beautifully." Malcolm visited every day, bringing her favorite flowers, white tulips. He never stayed long, but his presence said enough. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the window, Amara looked at her father. "Do you think the world will forget?" He shook his head. "The world forgets scandals, not courage." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep living. That's the best revenge." He nodded, pride soft in his eyes. The storm that once consumed her had finally passed. What remained was calm, fragile but real. When the doctor returned with her discharge papers, Amara laughed quietly. "It's time," she said, "to start again." And for the first time, those words didn't sound like survival. They sounded like freedom. A year later, the chandeliers of the Phoenix Grand Ballroom glowed again, but this time the banners read, "Hope Restored Gala." The event raised funds for survivors of domestic violence. Amara Lawson stood beside her father, radiant in a flowing dress of freedom blue, the same color she had worn the night she almost lost everything, now transformed into victory. The audience rose as she took the stage. Cameras flashed, but no one looked away this time. "Last year," she began, "this room witnessed pain. Tonight, it witnesses purpose." The crowd listened in stillness. "I stand here not as a victim, but as proof that silence can be broken. And when it is, we all heal a little." Malcolm watched from his seat, eyes shining. The daughter he once feared losing had become the voice he never knew the world needed. When the applause filled the room, Amara looked upward, letting the sound wash over her. The gala that began in tragedy now glowed with rebirth. The color blue, once sorrow, had become strength. Outside the same ballroom, rain fell softly. Jordan Kane stood on the sidewalk, coat soaked, watching through the glass doors. Inside, laughter and music filled the air, sounds of a life no longer his. He had tried to buy forgiveness, but money no longer listened to him. His company was gone, his friends silent. He was a shadow looking in on the world he'd built with cruelty. Through the window, he saw Amara on stage, holding a bouquet, her hand resting gently over her child. She looked untouchable, peaceful. Jordan pressed a trembling hand against the glass. The security guard stepped forward, shaking his head. "Not tonight, sir." Jordan nodded, stepping back into the rain. For the first time, he didn't argue. The city lights blurred in the puddles beneath his feet. Each step away from the ballroom sounded like another piece of his empire breaking apart. No sentence had hurt him more than this view, her freedom, his exile. Somewhere across town, the woman he once tried to break was learning how to rebuild. Night settled over Atlanta, the skyline glittering against the dark. Outside the New Hope Foundation building, Amara Lawson stood holding her baby girl. The sign behind them glowed softly. "Out of pain, we rise." She looked down at her daughter and smiled. "This is Hope Lawson," she whispered, "and she's the reason I'll never be silent again." Malcolm joined her, wrapping a hand around her shoulder. For a moment, they simply watched the lights reflecting on the glass, father and daughter, survivors of the same war. A quiet voice rose within Amara, words she had carried for months. "Justice isn't just punishment," she said softly. "It's a reminder that love is stronger than fear, and when women stand tall, power has to bow." She looked toward the camera crew capturing the event and added, "If this story reaches you, share it. Help one more woman find her voice. Comment, 'Stand tall.'" The crowd behind her applauded gently. As she turned to leave, her daughter laughed for the first time. The sound was small, but in that moment it felt like the world beginning again.